So the United States had an election and Donald Trump won it. And no, I'm not happy about it because that means people are going to die. And the reason that I know that is because I have studied a bit of history since I left my private Christian schools. The men have decided that they are going to laugh about this.
If we control your bodies, guess what? Guys win again, okay? Men win again. And yes, we control your bodies. It's your body, my choice. And men, women again. Men win again. There will never, ever be a female president. Never. There will never be a female president, ever. We will keep you down forever. You will never control your own bodies. You will never be the president of the global empire. Never gonna happen, sweetie. Your body, our choice.
Attacks against women have surged on social media in the days following Donald Trump's election win. Hateful and sexist phrases like "your body, my choice" and "get back to the kitchen" are getting millions of clicks online. White nationalist and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes posted "your body, my choice" forever on election night.
So men have decided that it's funny to say "your body, my choice," and there are reports of even young boys starting to say this to little girls at school. And even the fucking book community is not immune because all of you are saying, that's not true, not all of you. The really stupid ones of you, typically the white women and a few white men who choose to chime in, are saying that reading is not political. To which I say, welcome back to me doing reproductive rights content. We're going to be talking about nonfiction because apparently you guys, number one, think nonfiction doesn't exist. And number two, you say, stop making book talk political, which is the stupidest shit that I have heard in the last week. And I've listened to Donald Trump speak in the last week. So, wow, you really want people to talk about fiction, but only in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Reading is always political, whether you are reading fiction or nonfiction. Your access to books is political. And you know who did not want you to have access to books? Anthony Comstock. Do you know who that is? I'm guessing not, because again, I don't think y'all read nonfiction. See, I grew up in the kind of environment that Project 2025, whether you want to believe or not that Donald Trump agrees or disagrees with it, is irrelevant. The fact is the Heritage Foundation is involved with Donald Trump, and therefore we're in danger, baby. Project 2025 mirrors the environment that I grew up in. So now I've had to learn things that I was kept from learning. And a way I have been doing that is reading the nonfiction that you guys so conveniently ignore. So we're doing nonfiction reproductive rights content today, and I'm going to give you a history lesson about the fact that reading is political, abortion is a good thing, and you're all acting like fucking Anthony Comstock. You want to act like this guy? This is your hero? And you don't even know it? God, that's embarrassing. Today we're going to talk about abortion in the 1800s and Anthony Comstock using this book. This is called Jane Against the World by Karen Blumenthal. This was written before Roe v. Wade was overturned, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because now people are dying, just like they did in the 1800s, which this book spells out. But y'all didn't read, so you don't care about facts. You just have opinions based on what? Thin air? Nothing? Great. That's really helpful for the rest of us. This was sent to me years ago by Elyse Reads and Speaks. If she still has a channel, I'll link you to it down below. She's a lovely human and a speech pathologist. I will also be talking about stuff I learned in The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Fessler. This is about people who were forced to carry pregnancies to term in the couple of decades before Roe v. Wade. 1950s and 60s in particular is whose stories are cataloged in here. The people who were pregnant and they were not married and they were forced to carry to term because there was a huge uptick in pregnancies. Why did this happen? Because of Anthony Comstock. Because Anthony Comstock was a puritanical piece of shit who used the United States government to prevent people from accessing healthcare information and birth control itself because he was so squeamish about it. And then it was decades later that the Supreme Court finally decided, hey, actually, that was kind of unconstitutional of us. Except it was too late. A bunch of people were already fucking dead. Congratulations on voting that practice back into office. It's going to be decades before the Supreme Court finally decides, hey, this shit that y'all voted for is actually unconstitutional, and fucking killing people. Let's go back to the 1800s. In the 1800s, abortion was commonplace. In the United States and elsewhere, it has always been commonplace. As long as people have existed, there have been people who have gotten pregnant and did not want to be pregnant anymore.
Hilariously, after I recorded this entire video, come to find out my resident county book banner, Julie Gebhardt's, in our county upset about the supplemental reading list, including this book about Frida Kahlo. Now, say what you will about Frida Kahlo, but this children's book is fine. Here's Julie deciding to complain about this children's book that references Frida Kahlo real quick, just so you can figure out why this is relevant to what we're talking about today.
Frida Kahlo is actually an icon in the LGBTQ community. She also had abortions in the 30s, which is, progressive. So that is what people like to celebrate about her.
Just so I'm being tremendously clear, Julie Gebhardt's is not complaining about that book because it talks about abortion. It doesn't. It's a book for children, and it's fiction, and it's talking about a girl who learns about Frida Kahlo, a Mexican girl who learns about Frida Kahlo traveling to Mexico with her mother. And Julie's upset because she believes that because Frida Kahlo had an abortion, or more than one, in the 1930s, she thinks that this fiction book will be used to talk about progressive things like abortion. Just so we're clear about what the exact complaint is, okay?
Frida Kahlo was a Mexican artist who features weirdly gendered artistry, and she was also a communist. And along with her political views, she was a progressive who was having abortions like in the 1930s, before abortion was really even a thing.
So, as we can see, no person in my county needs today's education more than Julie Gebhardt's. So, yeah, abortion did in fact exist before the 1930s. So let's go ahead and talk about that so that we can educate a complete and utter dumbass.
Let's go back to the 1800s. In the 1800s, abortion was commonplace. In the United States and elsewhere, it has always been commonplace. As long as people have existed, there have been people who have gotten pregnant and did not want to be pregnant anymore, or could not be pregnant anymore. Both are valid reasons to get an abortion. There were no laws in the United States restricting abortion until 1821. And the first laws were not really about restricting abortion per se, certainly not a morality thing. The first one was in Connecticut, and it was really more about keeping pregnant people from being sold things that were poisonous. Because back in the day, birth control measures and abortion measures were made with different herbs, and sometimes people would use herbs that are poisonous to humans. So in order to keep pregnant people from being poisoned, there was laws enacted in Connecticut at first. It was not a morality thing, it was a safety concern, which is funny because now politicians are constantly regurgitating, just like y'all are constantly regurgitating the same shit in your conservative circles without, thinking for a hot second. They're constantly spewing the same thing. This is about health and safety of the women while they spew misinformation about misoprostol.
This is really about the issue of women's health.
We're protecting women's health and safety.
We are protecting women's health.
I just wanted to reiterate that this is really all about protecting the health and safety of women.
As if abortion is unsafe and going to term is safe, which is not true. It's the opposite. Having a first trimester abortion is wildly safer than having gone to term. But these people are stuck in the 1840s. Back in 1821, though, they did not think of abortion and pregnancy in the way that we do now. A person was not considered pregnant or with child until something happened that they called quickening, which is when they would feel a fetus move, which typically happens around 4.5 months pregnant. So this was mostly tied to religious belief at the time. It's obviously pretty unscientific. And they believed that quickening was when a soul entered the fetal body. And this was the generally accepted idea in the culture at the time. So then by 1840, there were 10 states with abortion laws on the books. There were only 26 states in the United States at the time, by the way. But 10 of them had abortion laws on the books. But of course, what happened is what always happened is that even though there were laws, abortion did not stop. In fact, when you outlaw abortion, the rate goes up. That has always been true historically, presently. I have referenced this 1.5 million times, but you should look into what happened in Romania in the 1960s. So abortion actually became more commonplace despite more and more states adopting laws against abortion. There was in the mid 1800s, there was 1 abortion for every 5 to 6 live births. But that's among white women, and I emphasize that because this obviously was the 1800s, the treatment, the circumstances of Black women was completely different. Black women were seen as, treated as, considered property. Their bodies, their reproductive organs, their lives, their own children, all considered property, including by white women. They were treated as property by white women. So even when we look into the history, we are still kind of centering white women because we're not really taking into account the data on Black women because they were not seen as women. They were seen as property. So keep that in mind when we talk about history, especially when we talk about reproductive history. We tend to leave out anybody who's not a white woman. But if you were a white woman in the 1800s, it was actually easy to find a business that was marketing different products like birth control and restarting your period powders, because, you know, they didn't really think of it as you being pregnant. It's just your period stopped and you need to restart it. So they would have these businesses who would sell these powders and elixirs to restart your period. And how they worked was often up for debate. There was no FDA back then. There was no American Medical Association back then until midway through the 1800s, which I'm going to come back to because the AMA's roots are racist and sexist. So one such business that offered these powders for birth control and restarting your period, abortions, and also surgical abortion itself were businesses run by a woman named Madame Ristel. So she had offices in New York and Philadelphia and in Boston, but she also sold her products by mail. She also ran a boarding home for single pregnant women, and she would take care of them for a fee during their pregnancy, and if they so wished to adopt out their children, she would facilitate that. She was one of the most well-known people in New York for being a provider of these services, and it actually earned her the title the wickedest woman in New York. And one such person who absolutely fucking hated Madame Ristel was Anthony Comstock. We'll come back to him. He's a huge fucking villain, and he fucked over the United States for decades to come. But we also have to talk about Horatio Storer, who was a part of the American Medical Association when it started, and he's just as much of a fucking piece of shit. And if you're wondering how men like Horatio and Anthony thought about women who get and or provide abortion services or birth control, they actually have a lot in common with someone alive today. You might recognize this person's statement sums up Anthony Comstock and Horatio Storer.
But do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, it has to be.
So the American Medical Association was actually formed in 1847 so that medical doctors could distinguish themselves from other types of providers like midwives and people practicing like homeopathic medicine and people selling these powders and elixirs that we've talked about. So they set these standards and established expectations of what medicine actually was according to them. So Horatio Storer, a doctor who was interested in obstetrics, he believed that fetuses, their lives started at conception and that they were no morally different than a born, sentient human being. So at the AMA convention in 1857, 10 years after it was formed, he actually convinced others of this belief of his. And the AMA agreed to study criminal abortion and put him in charge of this. So they argued and established that quickening was meaningless, which yes, that is true, but they just decided that life starts at conception, which is still a hotly debated topic today. It really falls back on like personal belief and no scientific consensus at all. But this shouldn't surprise you coming from a racist piece of shit like Horatio Storer. And they said that abortion should only be used to save the life of the pregnant person. So because of them, laws were passed and people were charged, and this put many abortion providers out of business. And side note, I call Horatio Storer a massive raging fucking racist because he was also a major sexist. He believed that women's only use was creating children, and he saw that there was an influx of immigration at the time into the United States. And he said, I don't like that because I'm a big man baby. We only have room for a certain amount of people, Horatio said, and it's the duty of white women to bear the children so that no one else has room here. Wow, you're a dick. But this is mirrored by the people who are voting Donald Trump into office to this day.
How it is you voted for Donald Trump when you're so into facts, because his entire campaign is not based in facts. It was all based in propaganda and emotion.
I voted for Donald Trump for one reason only. His policies, if implemented, would slow the dispossession of whites in the United States. If he were to deport all illegal immigrants, if he were to think very hard about letting in any Muslims, all of this would slow the rate at which whites are becoming a minority.
Why are you so worried about the white dispossession of America?
Because I want my people to survive. Is that so strange? We don't control China. We don't control any place where whites are not a majority. And If we become a minority, we will not control our own destiny anymore.
Let's talk about Anthony fucking Comstock, who is the Heritage Foundation and J.D. Vance of the 1800s. He was a deeply religious man, and honestly a huge raging fascist. So he saw advertisements around for contraceptives and rubber condoms and just talking about reproductive organs like anatomy lessons, and he was horrified, absolutely outraged. I mean, my God, the man could not sleep at night over this, because he saw all of it, even the mere mention of it, as obscene instead of just medical information. I am not joking. It did not have to be content that was intended to make people horny. It just had to be about reproductive organs or health. He had a moral opposition to anything remotely related to reproductive care. He saw all of it as something that should never be discussed. And in fact, he thought you were a criminal if you were discussing it or providing it. We see the same line of thinking modeled in conservatives to this day. Anthony Comstock would be so proud of you ignorant assholes. So in 1873, this motherfucker went to Washington and successfully petitioned the federal government, I'm not joking, for a nationwide ban on sending materials that he deemed inappropriate. They didn't get consensus. No, it was all Anthony's idea. We need to prioritize Anthony's poor feelings. He didn't want anything he deemed indecent sent through the mail, through the U.S. Postal Service. It wasn't limited to contraception and talking about abortion or advertising abortion. It was anything talking about reproductive rights. He was the original Moms for Liberty. So he literally asked to speak at Congress like he was the original fucking Karen. He asked to speak to America's manager and successfully petitioned the federal government about small things that had offended him, and Congress just obliged, because why would they not give this man everything he asked for? It's not like he was a woman or a non-white person. We better give him everything he asked for. Why not? And then President Ulysses S. Grant signed this into law, and it was called the Comstock Law. Great. But not only did this man get his way, he was put in charge of enforcing the law. He was named a special agent of the U.S. Postal Service. I want you to sit with that for a minute. This man who got hives thinking about reproductive organs being talked about in any medical capacity was put in charge because he threw a temper tantrum. Comstock would go out of his way to get people in trouble though, because he was a fucking stupid piece of shit. And he would use his position of power at the U.S. Postal Service to catch people doing things he claimed were immoral. He considered these things obscene, and so intent on enforcing his religious-based moral code on everybody else that didn't ask for it, let alone vote on it, he went after people. And the United States government backed him. And he would do this through many tactics, including lying. He would write letters to different providers who would provide these different things, these elixirs and potions and powders that were birth control or restart your period powders. Wink, wink. And he would say, "Oh, I need some birth control, please." And then they would send it to him, and then they would get arrested. Sometimes he would set up like full-on sting operations where he would physically go into their establishments, ask for these materials, and then arrest the people. So one such person that he did this to was Madame Restell. He went to her, asked her for birth control for his wife. Can you imagine being married to this man? Ugh. As a result, she was arrested, and then the day of her trial, Madame Restell died by suicide. She had already been charged for procuring an abortion before, years earlier, when the laws were a little different, and she had served about a year in jail, I believe, and she didn't want to go back to jail. And her death was very gruesome. I won't describe it, but Anthony Comstock's reaction to learning about her gruesome death by suicide was to say a bloody end to a bloody life.
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
This was not the first or last person, by the way. This is really sickening, but this is not the first or last person who died by suicide because of Anthony Comstock and his antics that were, again, sanctioned by the US government. 15 other people also did so. And Comstock's puritanical legacy affected people for decades after.
I said that wrong. What I should have said was Anthony Comstock's antics, the effect that he had on law, was felt both decades later and still to this day, as you can see right here. Just because something sort of goes away does not mean that it's not later used in law, in legal proceedings, in legal discussion, even all the way up to the Supreme Court.
He died around 1913, if I remember correctly, but he's responsible for the decades after because he planted that seed. My God, if he heard me say that, that would be too sexual for him. Like he would throw a hissy fit about that. Right there, officer. She's the one who made the joke. He's responsible for the decades after where people with uteruses could not even get accurate medical information about birth control from their doctors, which led to an enormous amount of unplanned pregnancies and trauma because people had to give up children that they did not want to be pregnant with in the first place, which is what is documented in The Girls Who Went Away by Anne Fessler. Anthony Comstock is mentioned in like the first chapter of this because you cannot talk about the years after, even though he was dead, without tying it directly back to what he had done. He is directly responsible for this. He is the seed that was planted, and this is the disgusting harvest that we reaped after him as a result. Eventually, in 1964, the Supreme Court struck down the Comstock law, saying it was unconstitutional, but it's a little fucking late for that, don't you think? Are you going to tell all those people who died as a result, oh, sorry, we misinterpreted the law? That's decades and decades of people who did not have their constitutional rights because one man threw a hissy fit over his own subjective morality. The amount of lives, the amount of trauma, it is incalculable. It is not outlandish to say that the legacy of Anthony Comstock is depriving education, perpetuating purity culture, and creating mass amounts of trauma that we are still feeling the ripple effects today. And instead of dealing with this, we have decided to what? Repeat ourselves?
The day after I filmed this, something happened legally. Here's the Supreme Court of one state talking about their own abortion laws, which for some reason conservatives still want abortion laws on the books that still have the language of quickening. I want you to see that the things that happened hundreds of years ago regarding abortion are still extremely relevant to today. The laws on the books, the things that Comstock did, the things that Storer did, the laws that were written back then, they are still affecting people today. So here is evidence of that.
12-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted by her father and as a result became pregnant. Under your interpretation of 940.04, she would be forced to carry her pregnancy to term, correct?
I would say under the policy choice the legislature made in 940.04 that would be correct.
Okay, so in that case, a child would be forced to deliver a baby. Let me ask you another question. How about a woman who is a college freshman here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison? If she is sexually assaulted and is charged as a third-degree sexual assault, which under the statute, under 940.225 sub 3A, that would be intercourse without consent. Okay. If she became pregnant as a result of the sexual, it would be illegal for her to obtain an abortion, correct?
It would be illegal for a doctor to provide an abortion to her in the state of Wisconsin, correct?
And were she to obtain an abortion after quickening, whatever that means, the penalty under 940.04 would be 15 years. It's a Class E felony, correct?
Are you talking about after quickening under 940.04 sub 2 sub A?
Yes.
I believe that's how it's defined, yes.
Okay.
But it would not be, she would not be subject to that penalty.
I understand. Right. If her is charged under 940.225 sub 3 sub A, which is a third-degree sexual, he would be facing a 10-year maximum imprisonment because that would be a Class G felony. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what the particular penalty associated with that crime is.
You can take my word for it. In that case, the penalty for aborting after a sexual assault would be more severe than the penalty for the sexual assault. And the local elected officials, amici, cite an article from the Journal of the American Medical Association that estimates that 65,000 pregnancies have been caused by rape in the 14 states that outlawed abortion after Dobbs. So the scenario is far from speculative. I want to discuss one more scenario with you, and that concerns the health of the mother. The term pre-prom, do you know what that means? Preterm, premature rupture of membrane. Again, one of the amici, the ACOG amici, brought up the case of Josely Barnica, who went into premature labor at 17 weeks. That is, her water broke. There was a fetal heartbeat, but her fetus was not yet viable. This happened in Texas. She suffered an infection that killed her because medical providers were unwilling or unable to give her the health care that she needed. And all she could do for 40 hours was pray that someone would help her so she could go home to her young child. and she died. That is a scenario that could easily, and perhaps has easily, played out here in Wisconsin under your interpretation of 940-04, couldn't it?
I'm not sure, Justice Karofsky. I'm not a doctor, and I would say that the interpretation of 940-04 that we're positing is the legislature's judgment as to what the law should be. I would like to circle back, though.
Hold on, I'm not done.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else other than pregnant people who are denied medical care under the law. Can you?
I certainly think that, for example, the FDA regulates particular types of medical treatment that are provided to people. I don't think that the notion of the government restricting a medical procedure is new, but I also think that there's a long-established history in this state of prohibiting abortion.
Mr. Tomey, and I fear that what you are asking this court to do is to sign the death warrants of women and children and pregnant people in this state, because under your interpretation, they could all be denied life-saving medical care while the medical professionals who are charged with taking care of them are forced to sit idly by. This is the world gone mad. I don't understand how that is not the crime here.
Some people go as far as to say this man's a fucking hero. In 2016, a man heard all of this and said, that's my man right there. And he turned him into fascism Wolverine. This is a real thing. This is a graphic novel depicting Anthony Comstock as a hero. Assumedly, the man who wrote this sells to white Christian homeschool moms. My mom probably would have bought this. I can't even lie to you. This guy, if I remember correctly, also, the guy who wrote this also made a entire website that was like an anti-birth control documentary. Great. Super love it. Just you perpetuating the issue of misinformation that then leads to trauma on people who aren't you. To see someone who created so much havoc in the lives of countless people for decades, who caused so much death, to see him and think, wow, he really took his religion and forced it upon others, took their property, took their books. Yeah, Anthony Comstock literally burned books, by the way. Congrats repeating the absolute asinine actions of that guy. He took their books, he took their medication, he took their medically accurate info away, he silenced people, he took away free speech, and he did it with the federal government's help. And this guy just said, yep, that's my hero. That's my Captain America. And I have a feeling that all these people who voted for Donald Trump, including the ones in the book community who won't shut the fuck up for a second, feel the same way. You are the modern day Comstocks. You do not care about liberty. You care about being in a position where you control others. And you will have blood on your hands if you do not already. I'm going to leave some resources down below that I hope you'll donate to, especially if you donated for Donald Trump and voted directly against other people's rights. Please check out Black Mamas Matter Alliance. It's a really important organization that I'm really passionate about supporting. And please, in every way possible, support people's right to access information, even if it's information that you disagree with, because otherwise you're kind of a fascist dick. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm angry now. I'm gonna go simmer down. Leave your comments and questions down below. Oh, if you fucking hate Anthony Comstock as much as I do, leave whatever emoji you would dedicate to him specifically down below, okay? Rest in pieces, Anthony. See you next time. Bye.
Okay, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astra, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Cami, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, Chris the Horror Therapist, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric D, Jess, Joel White, John E, K, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, KDM, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lauren K, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Matta Raptor, Max B, Melissa, Minby, Mixer Bunless, Alice, Peggy Luhu, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlett, SMK, Steph B, 3 Raccoons in a Trench Coat, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are Alejandra, Alicia Needs a Nap, Alistair, Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Bly Lavender, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Book Noodle, Bree Caitlin, Kate B, Caitlin P, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Claire Online, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorothea is not like other girls, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Fiona, Francis, Gadarn, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Helen P, Harissing, H. Rissing. Oh my God, you're going to have to tell me how to say that. I'm so sorry. J.M. Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jello Salad, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kathleen, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay, Lisa, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, MK Martin, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, Mima Who, Molly, Myth Lesbian, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Paige P, Pandemonium, Paul, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rhea S, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakia Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sean, Sophie, Stardust, T. Delegati, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, This Is Not a Trap, what a name, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Waves, Wobbs, Writer A. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.